with the highly anticipated release of version 2.0, which is arguably the best update in gacha gaming. Alongside it, our very first summonable character from Renacita truly is just as special, since not only does Carlotta deal massive levels of damage, but deals enough to contend with the one and only Jinhsi. So as Carlotta is currently available to pick up, and with Jinhsi dropping in the second half of version 2.0, there would be some players curious to know which of these two will be the best damage dealer and would carry their account the most in order to prioritize their pulls, or simply to just know who exactly holds more value. So with that, I'll be going through some strengths and weaknesses within their kits, the sort of team flexibility they each hold, their overall value, and then I'll be wrapping it up for those that would have to pick between them, if you should prioritize summoning for Carlotta or Jinhsi. Just before we jump into it, as always, would really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more WutheringWaves content and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Now I'm gonna kick this off with some kit standouts for Carlotta. As for the obvious, Carlotta is in fact our very first pistol 5-star character in the game, and with just that, she provides arguably one of the most fun and aesthetically pleasing playstyles out of every other DPS. In addition, Carlotta utilizing pistols would allow her to keep a safe distance from enemies as she focuses on dealing ranged attacks, which means you will have more time to react to attacks and ultimately have a more comfortable experience. However, unlike other pistol characters, Carlotta is able to parry attacks within her Twilight Tango state and when dealing enhanced basic attacks. So whenever Carlotta is essentially utilizing her musket instead of her dual pistols, you do have the ability to parry attacks as well as dodge them, which is a massive ability for a pistol character, and especially within Carlotta's Twilight Tango state, considering it is Carlotta's best state, and so having the option to interrupt enemies' attacks before they can interrupt and slow down Carlotta is an extremely valuable and unique feature that allows Carlotta to pull off her death knell attacks with little worry. Now alongside the ability to parry, Carlotta has multiple abilities that deal damage with a sure hit effect. In other words, and in specific, Carlotta's Forte attack and first resonant skill are able to freeze enemies in place to allow Carlotta to attack without any interruption. So especially since the Forte attack does provide a huge 80% damage increase for Carlotta's entire burst state, it is vital that Carlotta does pull it off, and so due to enemies being frozen, it will guarantee Carlotta would be able to. Additionally, considering other characters are easily interrupted during some abilities such as Changli and her Forte attack, it would certainly allow for Carlotta to be much easier to play with and for there to be less of a chance of messing up. Lastly, it goes without saying that Carlotta hits incredibly hard and is considered as a best damage dealer like Jinhsi. But the major difference is that Carlotta's massive burst DPS is dealt through multiple attacks within a short window, opposed to Jinhsi that deals a huge bulk of damage through the resonant skill and the rest through the liberation. Specifically, Carlotta deals major damage through the Forte attack, first liberation, death knell attacks, and the second liberation. So if Carlotta decides to miss a crit or two within the rotation, the overall DPS loss isn't as significant as it would be for Jinhsi. Therefore, Carlotta is given more leniency if she does miss a crit, as she would still be able to clear comfortably through any type of content. Now, as powerful as Carlotta is, there are a few minor but considerable drawbacks within her kit. The most notable one being that Carlotta's abilities do focus more on single target damage rather than AoE damage. Of course, they don't completely revolve around single target damage, but it is more difficult to hit multiple enemies than when you are using other DPS characters like Jinhsi and especially Camellia, which are able to hit multiple enemies without even trying. In specific, Carlotta's death knell attacks during a Twilight Tango state and resonant skills don't have the best area of effect. So in certain floors within Tower of Adversity that require you to take out smaller mobs before the boss, along with the pincer maneuver mode that spawns a lot of enemies to take out in the later stages, if Carlotta isn't able to cleave through them instantly, they would definitely spread out a bit and would then be more difficult to hit with some abilities. Another slight issue within Carlotta's kit is the fact that her resonant skills do take quite a while to charge back up, given there is a 14-second cooldown once you do activate the second resonant skill. So due to Carlotta's more powerful abilities relying on the resonant skill to be activated beforehand, Carlotta would then be much more time consuming in certain content such as farming open world enemies. Of course, if you are going through full rotations with your team, then Carlotta's cooldowns wouldn't feel as long, but you would certainly feel it outside of completing full rotations and when utilizing Carlotta as a solo DPS. Moving on to Carlotta's team flexibility, as most players should know, Zhezhi is the best in slot sub DPS for Carlotta, since she does provide a staggering glacial damage and resonant skill damage boost through her outro skill, along with having quick concerto energy generation and deals considerable damage. However, if you don't have Zhezhi, then you are only left with Taochi and Lumi as your alternatives for a hyper carry Carlotta, and both are incredibly slow in comparison to Zhezhi. So unless you do master utilizing Taochi or Lumi, then you wouldn't have the best experience with Carlotta's team. Now going back to Carlotta's long resonant skill cooldown issue paired with long skill animations, as much as they are a problem, it does in fact provide an opportunity to play Carlotta within a quickswap composition and specifically alongside Changli. During Carlotta's second resonant skill in particular, the animation does take a bit of time to complete as Carlotta is leaping over the enemy, which ultimately provides a great window to quickswap to Changli. Also, there are a few abilities Changli utilizes that do provide a window for Carlotta to slide right back into the field, such as the Forte attack and True Sight attacks. So overall, Carlotta's team flexibility is pretty decent if you are factoring in the ability to quickswap along with Carlotta playing as a hyper carry. But I would expect the hyper carry comp to be more popular as it is more simple to utilize. Now as for the Magistrate's kit standouts, Jinhsi is also a main DPS character and burst damage dealer which is capable of dealing tons of damage, along with having the ability to hover in the air above enemies within her secondary state. Due to this, Jinhsi is able to avoid attacks from most enemies as she literally hovers above them, which means there is much less of a chance for Jinhsi's rotation being interrupted. With Jinhsi especially, she does need to complete a basic attack string within the secondary state in order to pop the final resonant skill. So the fact that Jinhsi is able to comfortably complete the basic attack string whilst up in the air simply allows for an easier time than most DPS characters to complete Jinhsi's rotation. Now similar to Carlotta, Jinhsi deals a lot of resonant skill damage and most of it being dealt through her final resonant skill Illuminous Epiphany. In addition, as soon as Jinhsi pops a Luminous Epiphany, she is able to trigger the Unison buff immediately, which essentially acts like a second concerto gauge and will guarantee Jinhsi's outro skill to be activated whilst consuming the Unison buff instead of concerto energy. So unlike with other characters and there being instances where they are just short in concerto energy to activate their outro skill, that issue would never happen for Jinhsi when she does pop Illuminous Epiphany. Lastly, Jinhsi's abilities, as I mentioned earlier, are able to hit multiple enemies without even trying. On top of that, her basic attacks during her final state do crowd control smaller enemies, which then enables her to not only be top tier against bosses, but also within content that features multiple enemies. Now regarding Jinhsi's weaknesses, as I have stated a few times, most of Jinhsi's damage within her rotation will be dealt through the Illuminous Epiphany skill and Liberation. However, if Jinhsi does miss the crit with the Luminous Epiphany, then there is a massive loss in DPS. Of course, this can be fixed with just achieving higher crit rates, but not every player can just get good rolls on the echoes. So this can have a considerable impact on Jinhsi's performance, as it may force players to even restart in certain modes such as Tower of Adversity due to the massive damage drop off. In addition, the fact that Jinhsi's DPS derives from two abilities mostly, at times it can lead to overkilling a small enemy before moving on to the next wave or boss, which can be a pain since you are technically wasting a lot of DPS that could have been used more efficiently. So as nice as it maybe is to see huge snapshot numbers from the Resonant skill and Liberation, they do carry the burden of being Jinhsi's true DPS and renders the rest of her abilities at times not dealing enough damage. Now as for Jinhsi's team flexibility, to no surprise the best in slot sub DPS for Jinhsi is also Zhezhi. as she deals coordinated attacks to provide additional stacks of incandescence to Jinhsi, along with a 25% resonant skill damage amplification through the outro skill. However, unlike Carlotta, Jinhsi would have better alternatives as a hypercarry if you don't have Zhezhi. In particular, Yinlin would be a great replacement since not only can she deal coordinated attacks, but can deal great burst damage and provides a 25% liberation damage amplification. Though aside from Yinlin, any character that can deal coordinated attacks would pretty much synergize with Jinhsi, so that would include Yuanwu and even Mortefi. But you would definitely prefer to go with Yuanwu over Mortefi if you are forced to go with a 4-star alternative. The point is, any character that drops and deals coordinated attacks, or provides an amplification in spectral damage or resonant skill damage will synergize with Jinhsi. So not only would Jinhsi have more flexibility as a hypercarry, but would even have more longevity, since she does find value in many more sub-DPS characters than other DPS characters like Carlotta. Although Jinhsi can only play as a hypercarry and wouldn't ever be used within a quickswap comp, which does ultimately limit her flexibility within playstyle options. Now to wrap it up with Carlotta and Jinhsi's overall value, it goes without saying that both are insane damage dealers and do have their own strengths and weaknesses. Whilst Carlotta will be capable of performing better than Jinhsi in a single target scenario, Jinhsi does perform better in AoE preferred situations, given she can crowd control enemies and hit everyone with ease through her final skill and liberation. Carlotta, in my opinion at least, is much more fun to play with and has more team flexibility, since she can play as both hypercarry and within a quickswap team composition. On the other hand, Jinhsi is much easier to master and utilize at first, but can only be utilized as a hypercarry burst DPS. Although Jinhsi as a hypercarry is insanely powerful and has plenty of options for a sub DPS. So with that, if you are forced to pick between both, then Jinhsi being able to cover single targets and AoE content might be the better overall pick. However, if you do have Camellia to cover the AoE side of content, then picking up Carlotta to focus on single target could then be the better option to go with. So not only your preference, but as always, it will depend on your account. To end it off, both characters do want Zhezhi as their sub DPS, so you ideally would pick her up for either of them if you don't already have her. But she does clearly specialize in supporting Carlotta due to her entire outro skill being utilized. With that in mind, Jinhsi still doesn't actually have a tailor-made sub DPS just like Carlotta does. So even though as of now Carlotta does perform better in single target scenarios, when and if Jinhsi does receive a more ideal sub DPS character, then she might outperform Carlotta by dealing significantly more damage. So ultimately, Jinhsi does have potential to become even more powerful, whereas Carlotta is already at her peak, which means Jinhsi could possibly be the better long-term investment. Though as always, you should pick up the character that would serve your own account circumstances the best. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Would really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more WutheringWaves content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also, drop a comment down below on who do you believe is the best overall DPS between Carlotta and Jinhsi. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.